Welcome to another episode of Danny Brown Talks Phoenix. I am your host, Danny Brown, and today I am joined by Jose Leon, and he is a attorney and has his own law practice here in Phoenix. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Kind of excited.
Awesome, yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what type of law you practice.
Yeah, so I got here to Phoenix in '98 to come into college, and when I got here, I didn't know anybody, and a lot of what I tried to do early on was figure out what I was going to get into, and after college, I just thought let me go get a job at a bank, and the bank happened to have a segment that focused on real estate transactions in Texas, and attorneys are used out there for residential real estate transactions, and I said I want to be an attorney. So fast forward to today, and I'm obviously focusing on personal injury law, car accidents, but having my own business was part of the dream too. So
very cool. So between ASU and now, what kind of fill in the gap for us? Like, what did your career path look like?
Yeah, so after school, after ASU, I went out to work for a bank that was dealing mainly in brokering deals. The unfortunate downfall or beginning of our downfall here with our economy as a whole, worked there, and that's how I got the idea of going to practice law, or at least trying to be a lawyer, and got a chance to get started with school in the Valley, going part-time at a school called Phoenix School of Law at the time. We didn't have any other options for part-time schooling, so I started there. And when I got out, of course, the real estate industry was in shambles, and attorneys weren't being sought after for real estate transactions. Thankfully, I landed at a practice. I was still doing some of that in a small firm with 4 lawyers. And they all did various things. And, one of those lawyers actually practiced personal injury law.
Okay.
And so I got a flavor of that while still working with the other attorney that practiced in real estate. And that just got me very interested in it, and figured I could use that and leverage that for a career. And went and found a full-time job as an attorney once I had my bar card. With a mid-sized firm in town. Got a chance to cut my teeth there and deal with the fact patterns that come with that type of law. Always with the idea that I'd go out on my own, since I had that entrepreneurial spirit. And 2 years later, found myself in a situation where I had the opportunity to go out on my own. And now it's been 7 years. So
wow.
Just this past week, actually. Yeah,
that's huge.
Thank you. Time flies.
Yeah, it absolutely does, especially when you're running your own business.
It does. You have zero time to really, just think it through, and you're just working your way through it.
What encompasses, what's under your umbrella for personal injury law, and then kind of what's your bread and butter?
Yeah, so personal injury law is a very broad area of law. And, similar to doctors, you realize that you don't want to find yourself having to really learn everything that comes with all the areas that are involved within personal injury. You have medical malpractice within that, class action lawsuits. You've got even down to people just focusing on dog bites or slip and falls. And really, my bread and butter is a car accident. Wanted to hone in on that. That's where I got most of my experience at the firm that I was at before. And I felt that was going to be the best opportunity for me, not only to give the best service, but to allow me to focus on the big picture for the business as well.
So would you say that that's kind of your niche? So if somebody came to you for medical malpractice, you'd probably refer that out, and you just focus on automobile accidents?
That's right. The work that happens in these other areas as well within personal injury also require a lot of nuance and experience within
Sure.
those fact patterns. So we'd like to, at least in my opinion, if you're giving your client the best opportunity, you're handing that off to somebody that works specifically in that area.
Because you can end up probably doing more harm than good.
You could, you can fumble your way through it, but what I like to tell people is, look, I'm doing this day in and day out, and if you think about an oil change, you could probably find yourself through it, but who's going to do it most efficient and, with the least cost possible? And for personal injury, specifically car accidents, you think it's an open shut case, but there are a lot of things that you can do on the front end that could really affect it as the injured party. And then the attorney, if they have the strategy behind the regular process, you can actually leverage a case to then become a even better success at the end of the day.
Wow. So can you give me some examples then of people who would come to you and, I imagine unlike a lot of law, is it kind of a one and done type situation? Because hopefully they're not continuously getting into car accidents and
exactly,
injuring themselves.
And that's what I tell them. I hope you never see me again, but if you need to, or a family member that does, hopefully you call us and you think of us. So what I like to focus on when I'm having a conversation with somebody is really the type of development on the front end. So, we may get into a fender bender that doesn't cause us to really have any aches and pains or injuries, but you may find yourself in a point where you start thinking about going and seeing a doctor. And in my opinion, once you start going down that path of getting medical care, that should be the trigger for you to go and talk to a professional about what to do. There are many pitfalls at the front end of a case, down to the first couple of days of decisions. Not only talking to the insurance company could put you in a situation, but also the decisions you're making with the medical providers. People think, hey, I'm in an accident, I'm going to have the insurance company for the at-fault party pay. Well, yes, but that's a reimbursement process, and you should always try to protect yourself by using health insurance, if you are lucky to have that, as your barrier between the bill that you ultimately will end up getting from the medical care and in the claim. So,
and I would say that most insurance companies look for any excuse not to pay you.
And the sad part is that they've got their own objective, which is keep as much money as they are getting on the premium side in their pockets. And I think that the role of the attorney in that process is to make sure that they keep the insurance companies honest. We're not there to run them out of business or what other people like to say. Hey, I don't want to ruin that other person's life. Well, what we've done here in our American system of insurance is allowed ourselves to get protection to those people that we injure by buying the insurance to drive a vehicle on the roads.
So I'm in a car accident and I injure myself and I get injured. Like, explain to me kind of the steps that I should take and what I should do in that instance.
One of the first things you should do is figure out what you're doing as far as your body, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our folks are safe and get themselves some help, medical help, if they feel that is the situation that's at hand.
So you shouldn't put off going to see a doctor and talking to an attorney first.
100%. You should focus, and I try to make it a funny comment, but people downgrade the importance of a medical provider checkup when they don't have an active bleed or a broken bone or something. But I always
Especially
go back to
men, I would say.
I agree.
I'm notorious for that.
If you had a broken bone, you wouldn't be waiting to get a hold of me as an attorney. If you'd say, hey, I think I want to control this bleeding, and
right.
fix this bone that's broken. So always look to get the medical care first. If possible, and if the situation allows you to, then secure the information at the scene from the investigating party, and typically is a police officer.
What sort of information are you talking about?
So, typically in a situation where a collision occurs, responding police officer will secure not only the information from the other people that were involved. That could be, their contact information, insurance information, take some pictures, maybe diagram how the collision occurred, and then secure that in an exchange form, they call it. That's not the official police report, but it's a document that gets you going. And that document will allow you to figure out any damage to your property. Typically, your property is your vehicle,
Right.
and you can get your vehicle to a shop and get it looked at, and typically that shop can communicate with the at-fault party to get the ball rolling on repairs. The most important thing, I think, that if you are able to, and you're sound of mind at the time, that you could do is identify any witnesses that are not part of your vehicles, if you
Okay.
will. Somebody on the corner that can say, without a doubt, this person was running a red light or was doing something wrong, and I have nothing to do with this collision and with either party, and can give their 2 cents, because there are circumstances where the police officer can't tell what
Right.
went wrong, and both parties are going to have their stories, and you need somebody to kind of weigh in and tip the scales, if you will, to help you out.
Okay. So I go to the doctor, I get checked out. They say, yeah, you're injured. And then what?
So once a first responder or the first couple providers like a urgent care or a hospital kind of take a look at what's going on, you typically get a document with your records that's called Discharge Instructions, typically, where they tell you, hey, if things get worse, come back. If things are stable, then I would like you to go follow up with your current providers. If you have any medical doctors that you see for different things, medical conditions you may have, or maybe something happened with this collision that they want you to follow through on or follow up on, and that may be a specialist or some other type of doctor. So the idea would be that you follow through on those instructions. People forget that document is there.
Yeah.
It's because either they're in shock when they're at the hospital or something else, but a lot of times you forget, and first place to identify what to do next is to do that. Go follow through on that doctor consultation as a follow up, and then once you're not in an emergency situation, then definitely contact us. Some people contact us at the scene, and that's perfectly fine. But we worry about somebody's health before. So.
Yeah, I mean, your health is obviously the most important thing. So things to remember then, you get hit, you want to get as much basically information as you possibly can. You want to try and be in the presence of mind to grab any witness statements or at least witness contact information, because I imagine that's really helpful for you. And then obviously getting checked out by the medical system, making sure you're okay, then reaching out to an injury attorney to then move forward.
That's exactly right.
So in what cases or how many instances do you actually end up in court?
So civil litigation, which is the area that we're in if we're not being arrested or detained and charged with something criminally, is really paid by the people involved. So insurance companies are able to pay on the side of the at-fault party, but the person that gets injured has to figure out how to pay for their own way when it comes to presenting a claim against an insurance company. So
when you're injured and you seek out an injury attorney, you have to pay for everything up front?
Well, that's just the civil system. Thankfully, the personal injury realm has found a way to help the injured party by not having to pay for our time along the way, and also the advancement of costs for potential lawsuit or investigation or hiring of experts, and that kind of essentially helps that part of the civil side from not being able to access the court system. Having said that, the reason I bring that up is that when you are in the civil process and you're spending money really to develop a claim and to present a claim and to try to get an ultimate result, both sides are really cognizant of what that's going to cost. And the reason why the majority of cases do not make it all the way to the courtroom is because both sides are able to size each other's arguments up and look at what it's going to cost to get to that next stage. And a lot of times the attorneys, who are the ultimate advisors of their clients, provide the appropriate information for that client to make the right decision. And in the majority of situations, you find yourself, getting into a settlement. Now, having said that, my office doesn't necessarily gear a case to settle. From day one, we gear a case to go to court. And the more you prepare yourself along the way, the better results you're going to have, because the other side's they're going to realize that you got yourself you got yourself a good case, and or at least have a realistic expectation, and then you find a way to get it resolved.
So would there be cases that you wouldn't take if somebody came in and said they were injured and you don't think they are, or cases where you think the person will lose? Like, so are there cases that you wouldn't take on?
Yeah, what's interesting is that a lot of the legwork happens on the front end. Once my office gets involved, let's say somebody calls me up, we have a series of questions that we want really to figure out, get answers for, if you will, on the front end, and we identify what it is that may be at issue, as far as like a negative impact to the case. And then part of my objective really as an attorney and to give back to the community is to maybe hop on a call or meet with them in person and say, hey, this is the reason why we have an issue with your case, which is kind of part of my, in my opinion, my cut above or customer service type of portion of my business, to make sure that people know the good things and the bad things, and then if there is a case, and move it along. But we definitely give the time of day, if you will, to the person calling our office.
That's great. And how long would you say that the typical case lasts from the moment somebody contacts you to the moment that they, I guess, are essentially receiving reimbursement for all the expenses that they've had?
There is no specific time frame. That's the unfortunate part when we're talking to somebody that is involved in an injury and is distraught because their life is kind of torn up. What we try to go through as far as steps is talk about stages. You may have a person that maybe had some injuries or damage to their back and to their neck that can be treated with physical therapy, and those may take 8 months to 12 months, maybe a little shorter, depending on what the treatment looks like. You'll have people that need multiple surgeries, and may take a long time. There are a couple things that you have to worry about, though, with claims. The reason why I think that once you start seeing doctors that you should contact an attorney is because you'll have timelines. If you have a claim against the government, you're going to have a very short timeline to present a full claim.
Like if a government vehicle hits you? Or...
Right. So let's say a police officer is involved in a collision with you. That police officer, will have fault, of course, and that is backed up by a city or a county, and you have to present a claim to them within 6 months, and then subsequently file a lawsuit within a year.
Wow.
And we count them in days, and there's some technical math that goes into it, but essentially that's a very short period of time. Even if you have a situation where you're going to get through it quickly.
And that seems like a long time to me, 6 months, but
it does. In my world, that's a very short time, especially when you're, herding cats, in the sense that you're trying to get the medical records from this provider and the billing from their billing agency, and you start realizing that there's a lot of running around that you have to do to prepare yourself to be able to gauge what the case is worth. Because that's the other thing. People ask me at the beginning, hey, what do you think the case is worth? Well, part of that calculation is your medical care. So what did your medical care cost overall? The other thing is what type of injuries did you sustain, and what are we looking at as far as value drivers when it comes to the person that got involved in the collision with you? Were there anything that they did that was above and beyond? So, that gets difficult to quantify without the right information, the right evidence, the right tools. So, 6 months is a long time in the real world, but in my world, that's a very short period. Your typical claim in Arizona, it's a 2-year statute of limitations. What that means is that you have to get your ducks in a row, figure out what the case is worth, and if not, you have to present a lawsuit, which is, quote, going to court before the first day of the third year. That doesn't mean that you have to settle, within those 2 years. You just have to make sure you preserve your case and start going down the path of getting into the courtroom.
So if you go through this process and let's say you go to court and you do your best but you end up losing the case, who ends up paying then?
So when you lose a case, that means that you have to bear your own expenses in civil litigation. So
Meaning the injured party.
The injured party, right? So it's a high stakes game.
Sure.
And the farther you go, the more money you spend. That's hard money, not just the advancement of my time and my office's time, but you're talking about real dollars that are being spent to get to a final result. And that's why it's more important than not to get yourself organized early. Delay could be costly. So the more you get done early and the more efficient you are, the more prepared you are, the better you will identify what the case is going to be worth, and then have an educated conversation with the insurance company to say, hey, I think you're within the range that I think the case is worth, or you're above range. Of course, I don't tell them that. If they're giving me more money than I think it's worth, then great.
Right.
But it's important to do that, because if you go to the court and you have to file a claim to preserve it, you're starting to spend hundreds of dollars. And if you're within a 1,000 or 2,000 range of your settlement, and you could have settled it before, and you spend that $1,000, $2,000, that's coming out of your pocket. Sure. as an injured party. So the math may not make sense in real life for some people. And that's my job, to make sure that I tell them, hey, this is what your case is worth. Let's assume we're 95% there, but if we file a lawsuit, you're going to be actually losing money. You're going to have to be paying money. I want to make sure they're educated and understand and make an educated decision at that time.
That's nice. It sounds like you're completely transparent then in kind of what the process looks like.
100%. It's, they're the people that are injured, and they're the ones that are going through this. And, it's my role. I think, it's important for me, at least, to make sure I get them the best result possible, not only on the front end, maybe on a settlement number, but then also when it comes to the money that they're going to get in their pocket. So I make sure to match whatever they're going to get. If I have to take a pay cut, I'll make sure to do that.
Is there so I think when people get into accidents, and especially if they're hurt, you might be a little frazzled and not in the right state of mind. Is there a checklist that exists out there that people can keep with them, keep in their glove compartment, on kind of like, you're in an accident, these are the steps you should follow, so that they can kind of make sure that they do that work on the front end and not miss any of the steps?
There's just general idea essentially of what you should worry about. I could come up with 10 right now. I mean, my website goes into, some of those things that you can look into as far as steps. But the most important thing, in my opinion, is first, make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
Call a doctor, call an ambulance if you need help right at the scene, right? But once you realize that you're okay, you're not, in threat of dying or something like that, then make sure you contact your attorney or an attorney to make sure that you start down the right path, especially if you're going to seek medical care.
Well, a lot of these injuries, too, can show up days after the accident. I mean, I think a lot of people, anytime I've been in an accident, I fortunately have felt fine, like right after, but then the next day or two, you've got a stiff neck or, sore lower back, those types of things. So
yeah, and I'm not a medical doctor, but from what I understand, the adrenaline probably spikes, and you don't realize until you start cooling down, and you start feeling those injuries. So when you were not talking about severe injuries, of course, but in those situations, I want to make sure that somebody is not calling an insurance company and giving a recorded statement, which is a very important thing that you should refrain from doing, because insurance companies are there, as I mentioned earlier, to protect their pocketbook. So they will ask you.
They will call you immediately.
Weighted questions. It'll be setting you up to use your own responses against you in the future. And at the scene, a lot of times, like you said, you won't feel injured because of whatever's going on around you. And you may call an insurance company and say, hey, I'm fine. I'm not injured. And then a week later, you're seeking medical care because of the ailments you're feeling. And then you'll talk to me, and, we'll go through the process, and we'll start going down the path. And the insurance representative is going to say, hey, well, at the scene, he said he wasn't injured. Or the defense attorney will bring it up in court. And, of course, it's a little harder. It's not a death spell, but it's a little harder to kind of justify or consolidate those statements when you're given that type of information in an insurance company. So a lot of times I tell folks, when you're making a phone call to an insurance company at the onset, it's let's hope that it's related to your vehicle or your property, and let's keep the conversation related to that. If they start asking about how you're doing, just let them know, hey, I don't want to talk about that right now. The best scenario is when the vehicle's registered to somebody else, but typically it's you. You're the owner of the vehicle you're in typically, and
I think that's really good. I think that's really good advice, and I'd like to kind of re-emphasize what you kind of just said about making sure that when you're on the phone with the other party's insurance company, to be very careful of what you're saying to them and don't really kind of talk about how you feel. Avoid that is kind of the advice that you're giving.
That's right. Like I said, you can probably wait to talk to me, so that means you can probably wait to talk to the insurance carrier. A lot of times if your car is not mobile, you'll get a tow company will come and grab your vehicle and take it either to your home or to a storage facility. Those bills will get reimbursed. So a lot of people use their own coverage, with their own insurance company. I usually try to recommend that they go down that path for efficiency's sake, because your insurance company that you're paying for will, by contract, be required to help you.
And they'll go after the other insurance company. They have much deeper pockets than you or I do.
That's right. And they've got the luxury of time, right? So
Yeah.
they've got the money to help you now because they have contracted with you to give you insurance. And if you have the additional coverages, you'll be able to activate those. And then after that's all said and done, and they've kind of taken care of you on the property damage side, then they'll go back and communicate with the at-fault insurance company and then get reimbursement themselves. And the funny thing is that, not so funny for some people, but the thing with some of these collisions is that you may have somebody on the other side that doesn't have enough insurance to cover your damage to your property. So let's assume you have a car that's worth $18,000 and you have a 3-car collision, and the other party only has $10,000 of coverage. In that situation, insurance company is going to say, I'm going to do a calculation based on the severity of the damage, and I'm going to give you a percentage of that $10,000. So if you have the opportunity to activate your own policy, and let's assume you have $25,000 of property damage coverage, you're going to get paid in full, and then you'll be able to insulate yourself from the difference. Let's say that other insurance company that was at fault or is covering the at-fault party is going to give you $3,000. Well, if you get your property damage fixed with your insurance company and they send the $18,000 bill of repair, or $15,000, let's say it's worth less than that, the repair, the person or entity that's going to take the loss is your insurance company, and that's what they're there for in the first place. Yeah. So the best case scenario is that you're using them for what they're there for, what you contracted them for. So
let's kind of switch gears a little bit and say, say I'm driving down the street and I'm texting while I'm driving and I hit somebody and I injure them. Do I need to contact an attorney if I'm the offending party? And would that be you?
Yeah, so that type of person is not who I help. Insurance companies have in-house attorneys that, and sometimes they outsource it, but a lot of times it's in-house attorneys that will automatically represent you as part of the premium you're paying to I don't call it free because there's nothing free in this world.
Definitely paying for it.
You're paying for it already, but it's no additional charge. So that person should definitely be contacting their carrier. There are nuances, though. There are cases where you're kind of a percentage at fault. Well, what happens there? In that situation, you actually get 2 attorneys. I've been in those situations and have had to take those situations a lot farther. A lot of times we're in a court setting. But let's say you're 10% at fault. You still need an attorney to defend you, and that's the one that's included with your premium. And then you'll have somebody like me helping you get the 90%, hopefully, if not more, try to chip away at that liability. But in that situation, you'd have 2 attorneys helping you.
So in that situation, what if you don't get along with the other attorney?
Thankfully in Arizona we have a very good bar, and we we focus on being cordial and professional and cooperating, and even down to the people on the other side. We try to get everything figured out early so that we make it as efficient as possible. But our job is to, both of our jobs, let's say we're both on the same side, our jobs are to take care of you as our client. So I haven't heard of that situation, but there are, of course, those situations that happen. Thankfully, they haven't happened to me.
That's good.
I want to think that I'm the nice guy on the block, and I'll make it work.
Yeah,
but,
I can attest to that. You're pretty likable.
So the idea is that we're here for a job, and we're putting our personalities aside. So.
Do you have any cases or stories that you can share with us that were like super interesting, or does that kind of influence?
that gets hard as attorneys. A lot of times, I think that it's funny because when we're at a party or in an environment where we can have a conversation about our jobs, we have an opportunity to really go through those stories, and you get yourself as an attorney. Unfortunately, we have a lot of confidences that we can't disclose, and the most juicy ones are the ones that would kind of raise a flag and say, hey, you're talking about me and you're disclosing something about my case. But I'll tell you, there's definitely a lot of war stories that I happen to know and I can't disclose.
Maybe you'll write a book and change the people's names.
That's right. And the important facts.
Yeah, right. So I want to do some just quick fact or fiction before we kind of wrap up. Quick question. You can file a personal injury claim if the other party has no insurance.
You can. And I've actually done it in some instances. The claim is inherent with what happened. So even if you're not injured and you just have property damage, you still have a right to get reimbursement. Or let's assume that you have somebody that injures you severely and they don't have insurance. You still have a right to a reimbursement. If you're lucky and you have somebody that's extremely wealthy on the other side, you can collect personally. But the majority of the time, you will have the inability to do that. And, what we call in the industry is judgment proof. You can get a piece of paper that says you have a judgment, but that's hard in those instances. And I always recommend have as much coverage as you can get with your own company. Mm-hmm. So just because the other person doesn't have coverage doesn't mean you can't recover with your own. We like to call it, I guess, as just, regular people driving full coverage, but that may mean that you have coverage for somebody that doesn't have coverage, and it's uninsured motorists in that situation.
I think that's super important, especially in Arizona.
Right.
We have a lot of motorists that drive around with
either
not enough insurance or no insurance.
Yeah, so the biggest tip, if you're just a general listener, definitely talk to your insurance carrier and review your policy, because a lot of times you don't realize that you have an opportunity to protect yourself. And, nowadays with health insurance costs being so high, the structure of premiums and deductibles and HSA plans and whatnot, I'm not in the industry, but man, every year it changes. Yeah. I think it's that much more important to make sure you're in line with your insurance agent to right size your coverage. And what we don't realize is that there are, on top of the uninsured, underinsured motorists, which is, hey, the other person doesn't have coverage or doesn't have sufficient coverage, we also have medical payments coverage in Arizona. And what that means is that your insurance company will identify that you've been involved in a collision, let's say, and you say, hey, I've got a hospital bill of $10,000 and I contracted with you for $1,000 or $5,000 or even $10,000 or more of medical payments coverage, and they will take that gross bill. What I mean by gross is that it means the bill that is not adjusted by a health insurance plan that you may have or whatnot, and they will issue you payment for the top line number of that. So if you have $5,000 coverage and you have a $10,000 bill, they'll write you a check for $5,000 cash. The idea behind that is that you can then pay for your bills for something like a car accident when you may not have the right coverages. And so that sometimes helps if you have a deductible plan and you say, hey, I've got a plan that requires $5,000 of my own dollars from my own pocket to be paid before it activates some type of 100% coverage of everything above and beyond that. And a lot of times I tell people, unfortunately, a little too late once they come see me, you should be reviewing these with your insurance agent and making sure that especially as soon as your open enrollment comes or a new year with a new plan comes and you have to make a decision based on your financial situation, or maybe raise that, policy number, or I'm skipping out on the name now, but that payment that you have to make to your health plan. Make sure that you have the right type of coverage for medical payments to meet that gap.
I think people get so busy and the last thing I think about is insurance. It's kind of one of those set it and forget it things. And you get the notice in the mail and you just kind of put it in the pile and you go on about your life and you're never really looking at those things. I think that's why it's so important to work with true professionals who are kind of looking out for you and will follow up with you, not expecting you to follow up with them.
Exactly.
So then all personal injury suits are destined for the courtroom.
And as I mentioned earlier, that's not the case. Short answer is
fiction.
No, especially in civil side, right? On civil
Right.
side, in personal injury cases, car accidents, the hope is that you're preparing yourself for court, for the worst, if you will, but you're getting it done before that.
So if I have to sue for compensation, I'll be sure to get a large settlement.
The thing with the majority of cases is that, we have ourselves a situation where coverages actually matter. The unfortunate part is that I see a lot of cases where you have a severe injury, and it's so unfortunate because you have something that had just cost millions of dollars just on the medical treatment, and somebody doesn't have insurance, or somebody has only what the minimum state requirement is, and currently in 2018 it's $15,000 per person and $30,000 per accident.
It's crazy.
And obviously the medical bills are going up and up year over year. So
yeah, I mean it costs like $15,000 just to fix a broken finger.
Yeah. I wouldn't know about that, but I would imagine.
I'm being sarcastic, but
no,
with companies like Geico and Progressive and all
yeah.
these like second tier insurance companies where people get to pick what they pay,
Right.
odds are they're not going to be insured properly.
Right. Exactly. So it gets difficult, so I try to urge people to talk to their insurance agent and right size their coverage for themselves. Of course you're protecting other people, but a lot of times whatever coverage you get to protect other people is the maximum coverage you can get for yourself. It's not always the case, but nowadays it is.
And then finally, one lawyer is as good as another, and any attorney can handle my personal injury suit.
As I mentioned earlier, the majority of us try to keep within our lane, if you will. And, when I started my practice, I said, look, I'm going to focus on one thing. And, if I can focus on even a narrower thing within that thing, that specialty, we can't use that if we're not specialists ourselves, but within that area of law, you want to do that. And, I kind of pride myself on knowing the nuances. Again, like changing oil in your vehicle,
Sure.
You can mess it up a little, and in these cases, you don't want to even skip a beat. So the best case for yourself is to focus on finding an attorney that solely focuses on car accidents and on civil litigation that has to do with that, and that person will know a lot more and go through a lot more fact patterns and experience a lot more things that can end up benefiting you.
Yeah. So what's the big difference between someone like you and one of those discount injury attorneys that you see the commercials for all the time?
What I'd like to tell people is that I'm here for the person. At the end of the day, I'm not running a business for my own pocketbook. Everything I do, every single decision I make is for the benefit ultimately of the client, and we always try to make that difference. And of course, it's their decision on who they go seek, but we're a premium boutique firm that want to focus on customer service. So you'll get it at our office.
That's awesome. And if people want to reach out to you or have questions, how do they find you?
They can find me online at leonlaw.pllc.com. You can just look for Jose Leon on Google. You can dial us up at the office at 480-269-1083. But nowadays with the internet, it's really searching.
Yeah.
Searching online. So Leon Law, LeonLaw.
Awesome. And do you have a social media presence at all?
Not as good as I'd expect. Time, of course, it gets difficult, but definitely something I want to start improving on. So I do have it. I just, you're never happy with your presence, I guess
Sure.
is what I like to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's ever happy with their presence on social media. That's why you've got the Instagram models taking, the 60 selfies before
That's
they
right.
post
Yeah.
one.
Got to order myself a selfie stick. I'm not even there yet.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would want to put out there before we kind of...
No, pretty
No?
comprehensive. Looking forward to working with anybody that has a question, and
Perfect.
we're friendly.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today, a little bit about personal injury and what people should do if they get injured in a car accident.
Absolutely, anytime. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. This was another episode of Danny Brown Talks Phoenix, and thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.